All right, cancer-free with a question mark. We'll explain the question mark in a second, but let's just kick off with a bunch of things. Recap: surgery was basically last Thursday. Went home on Sunday. Was back at work Monday, and I'm in a lot of pain. So we're gonna talk about a couple few things here. There's a couple different tracks that are happening, and one of those is the pain track. So, not gonna lie, pain is legit. And the interesting thing about it is, right now, like, even gravity is awful. Like, I wished I could have gone to space. Because it just feels like there's just a constant pull on my arm. Especially when I'm lying down, and especially when I'm trying to lift it to get out of a lying down position. Now, I'm still walking a lot because for some reason when walking the pain is less, probably because my mind's on something else. Now, the other thing that's happening though is, in addition to the pain that I have, I'm also managing this pain with all of the pain meds. So I'm managing all the meds to handle this. And I have this thing in my brain where I don't want to get addicted to the pain meds, right? You hear these stories, you don't know where the line is. I've never been through something like this. And so I decided that I was gonna quit the pain meds cold turkey the following Thursday. I think they'd given me like 3 weeks of pain meds, but I'm like, nope, I'm out. I'm not gonna get addicted. I'm gonna grit my teeth and we're just gonna go through this. Dude, that was a bad idea. That was a really bad idea. So it didn't take me very long to figure out that was a bad idea. And but I still had not given up on my goal of getting off of the pain meds. And so what I did was I took the approach of trying to wean myself off. And what I did is I just cut my dosing in half every day. And even though it wasn't cold turkey by Thursday, I think within 3 days I was completely off of the pain meds to the point where I could just grit my teeth through the pain that I had left. But literally, if anybody bumped me, if I coughed, if I sneezed, it was rough. It was some legit pain. Now, in addition to the pain, that was kind of one track that we were on. We also had the drain. So, turns out when you go through a fairly large surgery like this, with this much work in it, what happens is, as your body's healing, there's a lot of fluids that are going to that area. And in order to help the healing process, and swelling and all that kind of stuff, they actually put in a drain. And what it was basically a tube that was inserted underneath the incision site, and it had this little bulb thing that was turned inside out and would slowly kind of pull and vacuum out all the fluids over time. Because I left the hospital so early, I basically had to manage that on my own. And so every so often I would have to just empty this drain and then reset up the vacuum suction and get it all plugged back in and everything. And then also with the drain, because I left the hospital early, I had to go back fairly quickly because there was a point at which we needed to remove the drain. They basically said once I got to a point where the fluids only filled so far, I needed to go back and remove the drain. So, real quick, because this is just kind of sets the groundwork for a future video. When I went back in to remove the drain, if you imagine the drain is like a tube and there's stitches around it, right? And then they take the scissors and they cut the stitches. And then what they do is, they'll take a pair of tweezers and they pull from one side and the stitches come out and get removed. Well, what happened was when this particular nurse cut the stitches, they were kind of sticking up like this, and I watched them trying to pull the stitches out. And they went like that. And like, I kid you not, I was terribly concerned at this point because it kept missing. And I realized that maybe some glasses might have been needed because their depth perception was far enough off where I almost volunteered to take the stitches out myself. But fortunately it was just one set of stitches, and we eventually got it. We got the tube out, and then that hole actually kind of closed up. You can still see. It's gonna be hard to see in this video, but there you can kind of see at the bottom of the scar there is an incision point where the drain went in. Anyways, so we had the pain, the drain. Then the other track that was happening now that we're at home is we had the PT. Now the PT was interesting because physical therapy. For those that maybe think PT stands for something else, but at this point it's pretty light, right? It's all about opening and closing my hand, trying to straighten my arm when I can, but for the most part, nothing too crazy. Trying to straighten my arm is kind of where the problem kind of came in. What happened was, anytime I would straighten my arm past, I didn't even really get past 90 degrees, and all of a sudden I would have this pain that shot all the way from my upper arm all the way down into my hand. And as I did a bunch of research and looking, based on what I was feeling and where it was, I was pretty convinced that something was going on with my radial nerve. And I got that. My concern was kind of affirmed when I went in and they let me know I was a little bit behind. And I explained to them what was going on with the radial nerve and everything. And they were expecting me to have been at a point where I could have straightened my arm already by this point. And basically, that if I couldn't get to a point where I could straighten the arm, they might have to go back in. And so obviously I was not super thrilled about that idea, and so I set about to basically force my arm to straight. And so what I would do is every night I would open my arm up to the point where it would start to hurt, and then I would just leave it there in slight pain, and I would just try to sleep with that. And fortunately when I sleep, I can sleep a little bit like a mummy where I don't move at all. And because otherwise, having my arm out of the sling, if I rolled over for some reason at all, it would be really bad. And actually, any kind of movement at all, like a cough or a sneeze or anything, like I mentioned, was painful. And actually, that reminds me, I made the mistake of watching Old Guard one night as I was kind of drifting off to sleep, and then I naturally had a dream that I had to fight off the bad guys and defend myself. And in my dream, I went to punch somebody with my right arm. Oh my goodness, I remember that vividly. That was a lot of pain. But anyways, so I straightened my arm every night a little bit. And then after about 2 weeks of that, I was at a point where I could actually almost fully straighten my arm. And they were happy enough with that progress where they were like, okay, good. Now you can start, more of the legit PT, like the arm crawls and trying to take my arm out of the sling and swing it around and things like that. So that's kind of what's going on with the PT track. We're heading that way. So let's talk about the question mark with Cancer Free. While all this is going on, the pain, the drain, the PT, everything, remember, we've taken about a 16 or 17 centimeter chunk of my arm and my humerus, and we've sent it off for a full biopsy, because our current thesis or evidence, basically, even though we have stage 1, we only have stage 1 from a small little needle point section of what we hope is the worst section of the cancer zone in my bone. And so what we need to do is we want to look at every section of that bone and make sure that there's not any additional boogeymen or demons hiding in the other sections of the bone that might surprise us. And so we're just waiting. And after about a week and a half of waiting, I got news back that the entire arm, everything, was stage 1. So, I mean, top of the world type news. Like you couldn't ask for a better chance of a survival rate past 5 years. I started joking with myself that I now have a better chance of getting got on the way to work because I live in a really bad traffic city. And I live about an hour drive from work. I have a better shot of getting off on the way to work because traffic's so bad than I do, making it to 5 years at this point. Now, don't trust the statistics, right? I make that up in my mind because I think it's funny, and it helps me spin stuff. So with all this great news, why is there a question mark? And what it is you're being told this amazing news. Best category you can be in, stage 1, cancer-free. But the problem is, juxtaposed to all this good news is the fact that I have to go in every 3 months for the next 2 years to get a deep scan of my lung. Because if you recall, I mentioned this once in a previous video, if this is going to spread, where it's going to spread to, where it's going to go first is to my lungs. So I have all this good news, but then I have this constant thing that's hanging over my head of we have to go look every 3 months at what's going on with your lungs to make sure. So all the sentries are still at their post. Everybody's still on high alert. And it's really hard to mentally be like, yeah, I'm good to go when we're still at DEFCON 4 or 5, right? And so what I started doing just mentally over time was there's a couple things. First off, even if this was just a normal surgery, I would still be going in for reviews and checkups to make sure that the muscles were healing properly, that the implant was behaving properly, that my body wasn't rejecting it, all these kinds of things. So that's one thing. I'd have to do that anyways, right? The other thing is I just started thinking about it as I'm glad we're on high alert, that we're not going to fall back on our heels. And if anything does show up, we're going to catch it early because we are still being hyper diligent about this whole thing. Now, part of you might be asking, well, why is it a big deal if you're just checking every 3 months? Well, because in order to check every 3 months, I basically have to go in and get, another CT scan, which is radiating my body, which, if there's a couple things that kind of set off some alarms for me with the extra radiation that I'm putting myself through. One is the doctor would love to find a way not to do this every 3 months. So the doctor is not super excited about radiating me every 3 months. Then on top of it, a couple of my nursing friends are like, well, the radiation you get now is what's going to hit you in 30 years. And usually for older patients, 30 years are going to be 110 years old. It's okay. We just radiate them as much as we want to, and it's fine. But because I'm younger, hopefully that's actually going to be a problem 30 years from now. So I have these two kind of interesting unspoken medical things, people who aren't super happy that, I'm radiating myself. But it's also one of those necessary evil situations. So overall bottom line, there's just kind of a lot going on mentally as far as, how to spin this. One from, we're still on high alert. I can spin that. Still totally it's great. We're not going to let anything slip through the cracks. The other part of this is I have a constant reminder every day because I'm in so much pain of everything I've been through. And so it's just there's just getting cancer off my brain and not thinking about it is really hard to do at this point. It's hard not to think about it. But I want to be clear here, all right? Everything is awesome, right? This is as good as it gets. Everything's awesome. Just like the song. And, I living the dream. A lot of times when people ask me, they're like, freestyle, how's it going? I'm like, living the dream. Now, a lot of times I will say that sarcastically because it's funny at the time. But in this particular case, I'm not using that sarcastically, and I couldn't be in a better spot. Everything's been affirmed and everything like that. So that's kind of what the playing field looks like right now. From here, for future videos, I'm basically going to be approaching those from a foundation of everything is awesome. No, I'm going to be approaching them from the foundation of cancer-free. There's a lot of PT, physical therapy stuff. I'm just going to share some of the progress along the way. Maybe for people who are going through, hopefully not a similar thing, but you can see, going from not being able to move my arm to being able to move my arm and so on. And then on top of that, I'll have a couple little bits about just some of the psychological battles that are going on. But at this point, the foundation is laid. We're cancer-free and we're just rolling. Thanks for checking out this video. If you've been watching these all along, thanks for taking the time, and we will see you on the next one.